The space station was loud with voices, lights, and trade. Aliens from many worlds came to buy and sell. But in the middle of the crowd, an old alien stood alone. His clothes were torn. His hands shook as he searched for coins. The guards at the food stall laughed. "You again, no money. Then leave," they shouted. Other aliens turned to watch. Some smirked, some laughed louder. The old alien begged softly, "Please, just one meal. I will work tomorrow, please." But the guards pushed him back. His body trembled. The crowd laughed harder. Then silence. At the edge of the market, a human traveler stood still, watching everything. His eyes did not move. His face did not change. No one knew what he would do next. And in that moment, the whole marketplace waited. The space station was alive with sound and movement. Lights from hundreds of stalls shone in every color. Aliens of all shapes and sizes filled the wide market hall. Some traded shining stones, some sold strange food, and others offered small machines that hummed with energy. Voices mixed together, laughter, bargaining, and music from a distant corner. To a traveler, it was a place of wonder. To the locals, it was simply another busy day. But not everyone felt joy in that place. In the middle of the market near a food stall that smelled of warm spices, an old alien stood with his shoulders bent. His skin had lost its bright color, and his clothes were worn thin. In his hand, he held a few small coins, not nearly enough for the meal he wanted. His eyes showed both hope and fear, as if he already knew the answer. He placed the coins carefully on the counter and whispered, "Please, this is all I have. Can it be enough for something small?" The stall worker frowned. A guard who stood nearby leaned closer, shaking his head. The worker pushed the coins back toward the old alien. "Not enough. Come back when you have more." The old alien's hands trembled. He lowered his head and whispered again, "I only need a little food. I will return tomorrow. I promise I will pay." A few aliens nearby had turned their heads to watch. Some looked with curiosity, others with amusement. A younger alien chuckled under his breath. Nudging his friend, the stall guard crossed his arms and said louder, "If you cannot pay, then you cannot eat." Simple as that. The old alien took a step back. His eyes moved to the ground as if searching for a way to disappear. His stomach gave a quiet sound of hunger, but he tried to hide it. The market was full of laughter, but none of it was kind. The worker behind the stall sighed and waved his hand. "Next, step aside, old one. Do not waste time." The old alien stood frozen. His hands closed around the coins as if they were the last thing he owned. For a moment, he looked as though he might walk away, but then he stayed, gathering courage. Once more, his voice shook but carried through the air. "I have lived here longer than many of you. I worked when I was strong. I gave my years to this place. And now I ask only for a little food." A few aliens in the crowd whispered. Among themselves, some looked away, but others smiled in a cold way, enjoying the scene. The stall guard smirked, as if the words meant nothing. The old alien tried once more. Softer this time, "Please." But no one moved to help. The worker waited for the next customer. The guard tapped his foot, growing impatient. The sound of the busy market returned, but the old alien still stood there, out of place, unwanted. Then something changed. At the far edge of the market hall, where the light was dimmer, a figure stood watching. Tall, with a simple jacket and quiet steps, the figure was human. Humans were rare in this part of the galaxy. They were known for many things: strength, stubbornness, strange habits, but above all, they were known for their unpredictable nature. Some feared them, some respected them, few ignored them. The human stood still, arms at his side, eyes fixed on the scene near the food stall. He did not speak. He did not move closer. He only watched. The crowd had not yet noticed him. Their attention stayed on the old alien, whose back now curved more with shame than with age. The coins in his hand felt heavy, though they were worth so little. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, as if wishing the ground would take him away. From the stairs, the laughter of the young aliens echoed again. The stall guard's voice rose above it. "If you have nothing to give, then there is nothing here for you." His tone was firm, but not loud enough to hide the sound of the old Alien's sigh. The human's eyes narrowed, though his face stayed calm. He shifted his weight, but still he did not step forward. He was waiting. For what? No one could guess. The old alien opened his hand once more, showing the few coins. "This is all I have. It is not enough, but it is honest. Please take it." The worker shook his head again. The guard moved closer, almost guiding him away with a motion of the hand. But the old alien did not move. His pride kept him rooted, even as his body seemed ready to fall. A silence hung in the air for a moment, though the market around them stayed loud. It was the kind of silence that lives inside the heart, the silence of being unseen. The old alien stood in it, surrounded by many, yet completely alone. And still, from the edge of the market, the human watched. His presence was quiet, but strong enough to change the air. He said nothing, but his gaze held a promise. Something was about to happen. The market lights flickered as the crowd shifted and moved. Yet many eyes still returned to the old alien, who stood with his head low. The food stall carried the scent of warm spices, but to him, it smelled only of distance and loss. His fingers tightened around the small coins. They had been enough once, long ago, when his back was straighter, his voice stronger, and his work respected. Now they were only scraps, reminders of days that had slipped away. Round him, voices rose in tones of curiosity. A pair of young aliens whispered loudly enough for others to hear. "Look at him, still trying. Why doesn't he just give up?" Their words carried a sharp edge of amusement, and a few others laughed with them. The old alien heard, but he did not answer. His pride and sorrow were mixed together, creating a silence heavier than any insult. His lips moved slightly as if he whispered to himself, though no one could hear the words. Perhaps they were a prayer, or perhaps they were only fragments of memory. The stall worker looked past him, eager to serve others who held full credit chips and flashing cards. But the guard, tall and stern, remained fixed on the old alien as if the scene itself entertained him. "Move aside," he repeated, his voice flat, but loud enough for others nearby to notice. "The market is not a place for begging." More laughter came from the edges of the gathering. What began as small whispers had turned into a ripple, spreading from one alien to another. Some wore smirks, others shook their heads in mock pity. No hand reached out to help. The old alien lifted his chin slowly. His eyes were wet but steady, filled with years that could not be seen on the surface. "I once built the beams that hold this station," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "My hands worked through storms, through long nights, so that others could live safely. And now, when I ask for a little food, I am treated as nothing." The words carried farther than he expected. The laughter quieted for a moment. A few looked uncertain, as though they remembered stories of workers who had built the first rings of the station. But the moment passed quickly, swept away by another careless voice from the crowd. "If that is true, then why are you here with empty pockets?" The sting of the question lingered, though the old alien did not answer. His throat was dry, his pride too heavy to fight with more words. The guard smiled faintly, as if pleased that the balance of the crowd had returned. "Stories do not pay for meals," he said calmly, folding his arms. The old alien's shoulders sagged. He placed the coins back on the counter, still hoping the worker might change his mind. But the worker only shook his head, already distracted by another customer. The coins slid back toward him again, shining faintly in the bright lights. No one saw, but at the far edge of the market, the human shifted slightly. His eyes never left the scene. He had not spoken, had not moved closer, but there was a weight in his silence. A few who noticed his presence glanced uneasily at him, for humans were not known for watching quietly. When they stood still, it meant they were waiting for a reason. The old alien looked around at the faces surrounding him. Where once he might have found neighbors, now he found only strangers. None of them would remember him when the day ended. His heart sank lower than his empty stomach. And still he whispered one last time, "Please, just a little." The guard leaned forward, lowering his voice but making sure it carried to the crowd. "You bring shame on yourself by staying here." His tone was sharp, though not loud. It was meant not to push, but to humiliate gently like a cut hidden under a smile. A hush spread through the group. Some were still entertained, others simply watched. The sound of the larger market continued, calls of sellers, music from a distant corner, the clinking of coins, but near the food stall, the air felt different. It was tighter, heavier. The old alien did not move. His body was frail, but his spirit still clung to dignity. He would not leave until he was forced. His coins rested in his palm, glinting under the stall light. He looked at them, then at the worker, then at the crowd. He had no more words. And then, at last, a few eyes turned toward the human again. His face was calm, unreadable. Yet something in his stillness unsettled those who noticed. He had not stepped forward, but the feeling grew that he would not remain a silent shadow. For long, the old alien remained at the counter, waiting for an answer he already knew would not come. The guard waited too, arms crossed, eyes locked on him as if victory had already been claimed. The crowd leaned closer, ready for the next small drama, but one thought now filled the space between them all. If the human decided to move, nothing in the market would remain the same. The market hall had grown restless. The old alien's quiet pleas hung in the air, and though the workers pretended to ignore him, everyone nearby still watched. The food stall lights reflected on his tired face, showing lines of age and years of effort that no one seemed to value anymore. His hands trembled slightly, not only from weakness but from the weight of humiliation. He still held the small coins, as if they were the last pieces of his pride. The guard shifted his stance, looking annoyed but also entertained. He seemed to enjoy being the center of attention. "Enough," he said, his voice steady. "You've been here long enough. There are others who can pay." He moved his hand in a slow motion, as though signaling the old alien to step aside. The old alien did not answer. His lips pressed into a thin line, and his eyes stared at the ground. He looked like someone standing at the edge of a cliff, not knowing whether to move forward or fall. His silence made the moment heavier than words. And then, at last, the human moved. It was not a sudden rush, but a calm and steady step forward. His boots echoed lightly on the floor of the market, and the sound was sharp enough to cut through the laughter and whispers around him. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Even the music from a far stall seemed to fade. The human's figure grew clearer as he approached. He wore simple clothes, travel-worn but clean. His face carried no smile, no anger, only quiet strength. He stopped beside the old alien and placed a hand gently on his shoulder. The gesture was small, but it carried more weight than 100 words. The crowd fell into silence. Many had never seen a human this close. Some whispered under their breath, but no one spoke loud enough to break the moment. The guard raised an eyebrow, forcing out a laugh that did not sound natural. "What is this? You plan to stand beside him?" The human's eyes did not leave the old alien's face. He did not speak right away. Instead, he waited, as if giving the old one the respect no one else had offered. The old alien's shoulders shook, but this time not from shame. For the first time that day, someone stood with him, finally. The human spoke, his voice calm but clear. "He will not leave." The guard blinked, surprised by the words. He folded his arms tighter. "Not leave. He has nothing to give. What is the point of keeping him here?" The human turned his gaze slowly toward the guard. There was no anger in his eyes, but something deeper, something that made even the confident guard step back. Slightly, there is always a point in standing with someone when they have nothing, the human said. His voice was steady, not raised, yet it carried through the hall as if the walls themselves listened. A murmur ran through the crowd. No one dared laugh now. The stall worker looked uncomfortable, his hands frozen above the counter. The old alien tried to speak, but no words came out. His throat was too tight with emotion. The human did not release his shoulder. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card. With a simple motion, he placed it on the counter where the coins had been. Its glow showed the mark of payment, enough to cover not just a meal, but far more. Gasps spread through the market. The workers' eyes widened. The guard's jaw tightened. The crowd leaned closer, waiting for the next words. The human spoke again, softer this time. This will cover his meal, and whatever else he needs." The old alien's eyes filled with tears. His hand lifted slightly, as though to stop the human, but he could not find the strength to finish the motion. His voice cracked, barely more than a whisper. "Why? Why would you do this?" The human looked at him, his face calm and kind. "Because no one else did." The words fell into the silence like a stone into still water, sending ripples across every face that heard them. Some lowered their eyes, ashamed. Others looked uneasy, as though a mirror had been placed before them. Even the guard, who moments before had seemed so confident, now struggled to hold his stare. The old alien bowed his head, unable to hold back the quiet tears that slipped down his cheeks. But this time, they were not tears of humiliation. They were tears of relief, of dignity restored by a stranger's hand. The market, once filled with laughter at his pain, now stood frozen. The human had not raised his voice, had not demanded respect, yet he had shifted the air itself. One act, one choice, and the room was no longer the same. The food stall glowed softly under its hanging lights, and for the first time that day, the old alien no longer felt invisible. His eyes stayed fixed on the counter, where the human's card rested, bright with enough value to buy more than he had ever dared to ask for. Around them, the crowd that had once laughed now held its breath. The human's simple act had quieted them in a way no command could. The worker looked down at the payment, uncertain of what to do. His hands hesitated, as though the weight of the moment pressed on him. He had seen credits before, far more than this, yet never had a single payment drawn so many stares. The glow of the card reflected in his wide eyes, and for a second, he seemed smaller, humbled. The human's voice, calm as before, broke the silence. "Prepare a full meal, fresh and warm, and make it double." His words were not loud, yet every ear caught them. The old alien shook his head, his lips trembling. "No, that is too much. I cannot." But before he could finish, the human turned slightly, his gaze steady. "You can, because it is yours now." The stall worker hurried to obey, moving with quick, nervous hands. Pots rattled, steam rose, and soon the scent of cooked food spread through the air. The aroma reached those who had stood by to mock, reminding them of their own comfort, their own full stomachs. Each one shifted uneasily, knowing they had watched a neighbor beg for what they took for granted. The guard who had spoken so firmly before now kept his arms at his sides. His proud stance had softened, his voice gone quiet. He opened his mouth, once as if to speak, but no words came. He only stared at the human, as though searching for something to challenge, but finding nothing. When the meal was ready, the worker placed it on the counter with careful hands. Plates of warm food, bread, soft to the touch, bowls filled to the brim, more than the old alien had seen in months. He reached for it slowly, his fingers trembling not from weakness now, but from disbelief. The human moved first, lifting the tray with steady hands and setting it before the old alien. "Eat," he said simply, with no tone of command, only invitation. The old alien tried to protest again, but the smell of the food reached him, and his body betrayed his hunger. Tears blurred his vision as he picked up a small piece of bread and held it close, as if afraid it might disappear. He took a bite, and for the first time that day, a sigh of relief left his chest. His eyes closed, not from shame, but from gratitude. The human stood beside him in silence, not seeking thanks, not drawing attention. His presence was steady, a shield without words. The market, however, was far from silent. Whisper after whisper moved through the crowd. "Why would a human do this? They are known for their strength, not for this. I did not expect such kindness." Every whispered word carried the same truth. The act had surprised them. All. The old alien ate slowly, savoring each bite as though it were a treasure. When he paused, he looked up at the human again. His voice was quiet, almost breaking. "You have given me more than food. You have given me back my place here." The human's face remained calm, but his eyes softened. He replied in a single line, spoken so simply that even the youngest in the crowd could understand. No one should lose dignity over a meal. The effect was stronger than any speech. Those words touched even the coldest heart, because they carried no demand, no anger, only truth. A truth that all had ignored until now. Some aliens in the crowd looked down, ashamed. A few stepped back, unwilling to meet each other's eyes. Even the young ones who had laughed earlier stayed quiet, their amusement gone. They watched the old alien eat, and for the first time, they saw not weakness, but a reflection of themselves. The guard, who had once held the most authority in the moment, now stood silent. He shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the human, then at the old alien. His pride, once so high, seemed small against the weight of what had happened. He could not undo the silence that had fallen, nor the respect the human had earned in a single act. As the old alien finished his meal, the human reached into his pocket once more and placed another card on the counter. "For clothes," he said quietly, "and for a place to rest." The worker accepted the card with both hands, bowing his head slightly, unable to meet the human's eyes. The market itself seemed to hold its breath again, as if waiting for what would happen next. The old alien, his voice shaking with gratitude, whispered, "You are a stranger, yet you have given me more than those I have known all my life." The human only answered with silence, his hand still steady on the old alien's shoulder. Sometimes silence itself was the greatest reply, and in that moment, the market was no longer the same place. The lights seemed brighter, the air softer, and every heart carried the memory of what they had just witnessed. One act had shifted the balance of the hall, and no one could return to how it was before. The night on Earth was calm, but above the planet the gathering continued in secret. Inside the station, the girl stood near the wide window, her strange outfit glowing faintly under the dim lights. It was not just clothing, it seemed alive, like a second skin woven with threads of light. The others still whispered, but less. Now, something about her silence had begun to unsettle them. She didn't defend herself, she didn't explain, and yet her presence grew heavier, like a hidden truth waiting to come out. The human boss watched closely. He didn't laugh, and he didn't look away. Every detail of her posture, every flicker in her strange outfit, he read like an open book. She stood tall, calm, and unshaken. Though she was surrounded by eyes filled with doubt, there was strength in the way she carried herself. But it was not the strength of someone trying to prove a point. It was the quiet kind, the kind that spoke of knowing something no one else knew. At that moment, the boss stepped forward again. The whispers stopped, and silence spread like a wave. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he stood beside her, at the window, gazing at the stars with her, as if they were equals sharing the same sky. It was strange, almost uncomfortable, how natural it looked. The alien girl turned her head slightly, studying him with curious eyes. She seemed to be waiting for him to ask her the question. No one else dared to ask. Finally, his voice broke the silence. "Why here?" he asked softly. It wasn't a question about her outfit, nor about her appearance. It was deeper, more careful. She didn't answer at once. Instead, she placed her hand against the glass, where the stars burned in endless silence. Her outfit shimmered brighter, almost as if the stars themselves had entered the fabric. "This world," she whispered, her voice low, almost like music, "is louder than you think. Your people hear noise. I hear patterns. That is why I came." No one understood what she meant, except perhaps the human boss. His expression didn't change, but his eyes grew sharper, more thoughtful. The others only exchanged confused glances. Patterns. What patterns could she mean? The girl's outfit pulsed once more, glowing in strange rhythm. To most, it looked random. To him, it looked like something else, an order, a code, perhaps even a message hidden in plain sight. He realized then that her clothing was not strange at all. It was a language, one none of the others could read. The boss turned back to the group, his voice calm, yet carrying a weight none could ignore. "You laughed at her because you did not understand. But what she wears is not for us. It is for something larger, something beyond us." Unease grew in the room. The girl didn't interrupt. She only watched, her lips curling into the smallest hint of a smile, as though she knew this moment was meant to happen. Someone finally asked, "What do you mean, larger?" The boss only said, "You'll see." And with those words, he stepped back from the window. The girl did not move, but her glowing outfit pulsed again, this time stronger, casting the faintest shapes into the room. They weren't random. They looked like maps or star paths traced across the walls for anyone with eyes to see. The whispers began again, but this time they weren't mocking. They were nervous, uncertain, almost fearful. The boss watched all of them quietly, but his gaze always returned to her. He was certain now this girl had not come here by mistake. She had come with a reason, and her outfit was not a weakness to laugh at, but a key to something hidden in the stars. And yet, even he didn't know what would happen when that key was finally turned. The hall was quiet after the long gathering, yet whispers still lingered in the corners like echoes refusing to fade. The alien girl, who had once been laughed at for her outfit, now stood at the center of attention. But her eyes kept returning to one person, the human boss, who had spoken for her when no one else would. Something had shifted in the air since that moment. The others tried to act normal, but curiosity burned in their expressions. They could not understand why he had chosen her, and why his words carried such weight. Late that night, as the lights of the station dimmed, the girl walked alone through the glass corridor that showed the stars outside. She lifted her hand against the cold surface and whispered to herself. She had been rejected by her own people, dismissed as useless, yet here she was, offered a chance she never thought possible. The human's voice still echoed in her memory. Hire her immediately. No one had ever spoken of her with such certainty. She wondered if he saw something in her that she could not see herself. The human boss, meanwhile, sat in his office, reviewing data that seemed ordinary to him, but carried hidden meaning for the girl. As kind, he leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple, but his mind kept drifting to her. Why had he spoken so strongly? Even he wasn't sure. It wasn't just instinct, it felt like a pull, as though something important had been set into motion. He had chosen her without hesitation, and now he could not escape the sense that his decision had tied their fates together. When morning came, the hall filled again with the same people. But the mood had changed. This time, eyes did not laugh when they looked at the alien girl. Instead, they searched her, trying to understand why she had been chosen. She walked slowly, her steps careful but steady. For the first time, she felt that her presence mattered. Every sound in the room seemed louder, every detail sharper. She noticed even the smallest movements, like how the human boss watched her without saying a word, as if waiting for something only she could do. She sat at her station, her hands trembling slightly as she touched the controls. The screens lit up with streams of patterns, complex and shifting, almost unreadable. The others frowned, confused by the mess of symbols, but the girl's eyes widened. To her, the patterns were not chaos, they were language. She whispered under her breath, the shapes and lines aligning in her mind like music finding its rhythm. Without realizing it, she leaned forward and began to work, her fingers tracing connections faster than she thought possible. The hall grew silent. No one dared interrupt. They had seen her clumsy, uncertain, even mocked. But now, she moved with purpose, her every action revealing a side of her no one expected. The human boss smiled faintly, though he said nothing. He had seen this potential from the beginning, though he hadn't known how to explain it. Now it was unfolding before everyone's eyes. When the display finally shifted into order, a collective gasp filled the room. Data that had remained hidden for years suddenly unlocked, revealing a pathway none of them had ever accessed. The alien girl leaned back, her chest rising and falling quickly, and looked around as if waking from a dream. For a moment, there was only silence. Then the human boss stood slowly and spoke, his voice calm but carrying weight. "This is why she is here." The others exchanged uncertain glances, their doubts now cracked open by what they had witnessed. The girl, who had once been invisible, now sat in the center of something far larger than herself. She had revealed a secret even she did not know she carried. Yet deep in her heart, she felt a quiet fear. What she had uncovered was not just information, it was a door, and behind it waited something unknown, something that could change not only her life but everyone's future. And as the human boss met her eyes, she realized he knew it too.